Hey everyone, today I wanted to talk about AI, specifically GitHub Copilot, Cursor, those kinds of tools. I've been using them for a long time, basically since they came out, and I wanted to talk about why I've quit using them.
What? No!
The idea for this video was spurred by an article which I read a few days ago that really crystallized my feelings. Made me think about, this guy's right. And I feel the same way. So I figured I would make a video, and that sounds interesting to you. Stay tuned. Let's go. All right, so here is GitHub Copilot. This is the tool I use at work. We have an enterprise subscription, and yeah, that's what I've been using for a long time. I also tried Cursor personally on my own computer at home, and it was great. Actually, it was better than Copilot, but I didn't want to pay for it because I already had Copilot. So I just stuck to that. And to be honest, it's a good tool. It is not, I repeat, it is not going to replace software engineers. No matter what Zuck says or Satya says, software engineers are not going away. You're not going to vibe code your way into a product. Like, it's just not going to happen. No matter how good AI becomes, I don't see it. I don't see it. I've been using it for a year and a half, and we are nowhere near replacing software engineers. It's just not good enough. Now, GitHub Copilot itself is actually a good tool. Now you can use it for certain things like generating tests, commenting your code, perhaps doing some simple things like code conversions. It's really good for that, right? Like I had a thing I was using it to convert C# into TypeScript. I had some calculation formulas I needed to move over to the client side, and it did really well with that. But you know, that's kind of about it. It's not going to design a fully working system for you. Neither is ChatGPT 4.0 or anything like that. They don't have the context, right? And no matter how good you are at prompt engineering, it's just not gonna know all of the nuances that it needs to know about your business, about the people you work with, and requirements. You know, stuff like that. It's just not gonna happen. But let's talk about all of that while looking at this article. This article written by, Luciano, maybe that's how you pronounce his name. Written on April 1st. It's not an April Fool's. It's an unfortunate date, but it is what it is. I did want to talk about this specific article because it really crystallizes how I feel about AI tools in your code editor. Literally, I could have written this article. This is exactly how I feel. Now, of course, I don't write in C++. He is an Unreal Engine developer. That's not me. You know, I'm a C# .NET developer, so maybe Unity. But, you know, the article is still spot on. So let's talk about it. So at the beginning, he gives a pretty good analogy here using Tesla FSD. FSD stands for full self-driving. He talks about getting a Tesla and turning on FSD, and then the car just drives itself while he tells it to change lanes every now and then he just listens to music and podcasts while zoning out. Now, you're not supposed to zone out. You're supposed to hold the wheel, or now they have the camera looking at your eyes. But nevertheless, you can kind of pretend you're there, but you're spacing. And he talks about how when you drive the car often, you know what to do. You know, you have the feeling of a car, right? But when you're turning on FSD, the car drives itself. You don't do anything. It just drives you. Kind of like one of those, taxis, automated taxis that drive in San Francisco. So this analogy is supposed to illustrate that if you let AI do everything, you're going to forget how to do anything. And at the end here, he says, being reliant on Tesla's FSD took away my own ability to go into autopilot. I'm assuming this autopilot here means that he is coding, right? Autopilot, you zone out, you turn on some music, and you start coding. So yeah, great analogy, totally relevant, I feel like, to the rest of the article. So he talks about his experience with AI code editors. So it's kind of the same thing where he talked about where he started out using AI-powered code editors, and he felt that it was really good initially. Then in his free time, he started exploring other code editors like Cursor, and he realized that over time, he was feeling less competent at doing basic software development. And I want to pause here and talk about this. This is spot on. This is literally the same thing that I felt just recently, 2 months ago when I quit. So yeah, he basically says that his skills began to atrophy, right? And with his work, and he's a senior software engineer, AI started to become less useful over time. Now, I don't particularly care about the fun aspect of it. I still actually find coding with AI kind of fun. But this part here, I started to feel a bit insecure about making some implementation decisions myself. This part here, I think is also important because when you're relying on AI, especially GitHub Copilot, or really any LLM that's trained on publicly accessible code, you must understand that that code is probably not very high quality. You know, garbage in, garbage out. And LLMs have to be trained on enormous amounts of data. So it makes sense that some of the data coming in would not be very high quality, right? So when you're asking for an implementation decision from AI, it's possibly not gonna give you something very good. Now you're gonna have to refine that, right? And if you don't have confidence as a senior engineer that the code that's generated is good, if you don't have that confidence, then you may create a system with a flaw, like a security flaw, and that could be a critical mistake. And the other thing I want to do is just highlight this part here. It became clear to him that if he did not practice the basics, he was less capable on the harder parts as well, right? There's a reason why, pro athletes still do all the basics, because if they didn't, they would be out of shape and they wouldn't be able to do like competitions, all the harder parts, right? So that analogy totally makes sense to me, what he wrote here. Then he talks about losing the intuition. Now, this is not super clear. It's kind of an abstract concept, but essentially, if you're a senior software engineer and you've been building systems for a while, you can kind of see patterns, both in the code and in design, right? Like if you get a problem where, I don't know, on the front end, for example, you are loading a lot of textures. Maybe you're loading a map or something, and you have to load a lot of textures in parallel. Well, making all those HTTP requests and resolving all of them could block your render thread, right? So you push them off to the web worker and then you send those textures back or something like that, right? Or maybe you have service worker that does all this for you. But AI wouldn't be able to tell you this because it doesn't have the context of your entire system. And even if you really prompt engineered it really well, it's not going to know the people you work with. It's not going to know the business realities of your work. And in the time it takes you to teach AI all of these things that it needs to know in order to give you a good solution, you could have written the code yourself, or worse, you've run out of the context window. So there's that, right? So intuition is something you develop over time, and AI is just not going to have that. And he gives a really good example here. When you receive a Slack message that the website works fine, but the app is down in production, I tried it locally and there it works fine, and nothing in Sentry either. You get a message like that, right? Well, good luck getting an AI agent to fix this for you, right? Maybe it can, maybe it can't. Depends on how much context it has, right? But the context windows are limited. Computing is limited. You can't tell your customer, sorry, Cursor doesn't get it, or GitHub Copilot will prompt more tomorrow, meaning maybe you've run out of credits. It does not make sense, right? You cannot tell a customer their system is down and AI can't fix it. It does not compute. Now, this is another part of the article which I also completely agree with. Silicon Valley has this tendency to overpromise and underdeliver. Elon Musk's Tesla, he promised full self-driving when Model S came out, right? You could have bought Model S and you could have prepaid for FSD. This is like 10 years ago. And it still sucks to this day. It is no good. Now, recently, Apple released iPhone 16 and they said, hey, Apple Intelligence, it's so good. It's coming 3 to 6 months from now. That was like a year ago. Where is this intelligence at, right? It's still not good. Zuckerberg, right, said 3 or 5 months ago, something like that engineers are going to be all replaced by AI in 6 months. That's what he said. What? We're still here. We're not being replaced. So this whole thing about 3 to 6 months from now does not check out. So totally, these promises of AI being able to do things for you, they're just promises. They want to sell you a subscription to GitHub Copilot or to Cursor or to some other AI tool. And don't get me wrong, some of these AI tools are useful. I use ChatGPT. I have a personal subscription to it, recently generating a lot of images. But yeah, like, it's good. I used Midjourney before. It was great. And there are AI tools that are worth paying for sure. But for coding, I'm not sold on that. And he says here, for some things, you really should not want to rely on AI, especially when implementing things like authentication systems, right? JWAT signing or RBAC, anything like that. Anywhere where GitHub was trained on code that is not low quality, and it was, you do not want to use that AI expertise to help you with critical tasks in your code. So that's what he talks about in this paragraph here, and I totally 100% agree. Now, I just mentioned it earlier, AI is good for some things. It is good, I feel like, separately out of your code editor. Now, can you still generate code in, let's say you go chatgpt.com, you type in, hey, I need to know how to write recursion for this problem, or I need to know how to, I don't know, use a service worker to intercept fetches or something like that, right? Like, you need to know something. It'll generate some code for you. It'll give you an example of how to do that. You can do that instead of going to MDN or Microsoft Docs or something like that. So I use it for that, actually. I use it specifically for generating boilerplate examples. And then I take these examples, put them in my code, and then work with them to make them work for my own code. It's good for learning. Totally, 100%. And the one thing that I'll say about in-editor AI is you can select code and you can ask it to explain it to you. And like 95% of the time, it's going to do a really good job of explaining that code. So that part is still useful. And I will admit, I do kind of miss that. I removed AI tools from my editors, and I do miss that a little bit. Now, it is not perfect. It'll make mistakes. And he does talk about it here. The AI seems to struggle with these sometimes, and he gets mixed results. And yeah, I agree with that. But I would say in my experience, most of the time, it was very good. It was very good at explaining the code, even when it didn't have all the context, right? Because you would select a block of code and then ask it to explain, but then there could be like some private functions in here and I didn't know about them because they were not selected. So, it made some assumptions, but most of the time I thought it was really good. Now he does say he has some niche interests, so maybe that's why for him, he got mixed results. But in my case, that was pretty useful. That's kind of the gist of the article. He talks about, doing what he loves. So coding. So if you use AI to generate code for you, you're no longer doing what you love. And he talks about advice to new programmers. And this is actually really good advice. Now, I said earlier, it's excellent for learning. Totally true. If you needed to explain some code for you, totally true. But don't let AI do all of your work. Don't have it generate code for you like you would, have it generate answers for a test or something like that, because you need to be able to understand that code and think of it yourself. The struggle is how you build that intuition that I talked about earlier. And regardless, even though that AI is going to give you some output, that output might not be very good. Again, going back to garbage in, garbage out. So if you're a junior engineer, if you're just getting into the industry, right, you don't know if it's good or not. So my recommendation to anybody getting into the field is, first, don't listen to the doom and gloom. This profession is not going to disappear. Someone's going to need to build all these things still, right? AI, you're not going to vibe your way to an enterprise product. It's just not going to happen. Prompt engineering is important for certain things, but it is not for I would say not for coding. And the other thing is, if you want to learn to code, keep coding. Do not let AI do the heavy lifting, because through struggle is how you're going to grow. Now, it's funny, he says, I don't want to sound elitist, but if you don't want to learn to go beyond vibe coding, maybe coding isn't for you. Totally. But then again, I think vibe coders, quote unquote vibe coders, I don't think they really want to code. They just want to build products, right? They want to glue pieces together and build a product, make some money. So I don't even think they're interested really in being software engineers. So I don't think he's really sounding elitist. It's just it's just fact. So in conclusion, using AI, you are sacrificing knowledge for speed. And I do agree that sometimes it's worth making this trade-off. It really depends on what it is that you're doing. You know, you don't want to be like, perhaps you don't want to generate a PowerPoint. No one likes doing that, right? Or analyze an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. And you can use Copilot for that. You just want to get results out quickly. And right, like no one actually likes spending time in PowerPoint, I don't think. He does bring up a good point here, which is what I said earlier. It is important to remember that even the best athletes in the world are still doing their basic drills for a reason. And yeah, you need to practice the basics. If you don't, then your skills will atrophy and you will become a worse engineer. We are still far away from AI taking over our jobs. Like I said earlier, a lot of companies just want to, sell you their product. It's a sales tactic to get more customers so they can, show traction to their investors. Totally, 100%. This is exactly what's happening. Don't fall for it. Software engineering is not going away. It's not being replaced in 6 months. Not going to happen. And remember, AI is a tool. It's not good or bad. It's what you do with it, right? So stay curious and keep learning. 100% agree. I just thought this was an interesting article, and this topic has been on my mind since I quit using GitHub Copilot about 2 months ago. So I really wanted to share this, kind of give my opinion on the topic, and I really want to know what other engineers have to say about this, because it is a hot topic. And myself and Luciano here on this article, we're just two developers, two engineers. I want to know what others think. So feel free to post in the comments how you feel about this. Let me know. Let's start a discussion because I'm curious. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.